order. We have David, will you please read the county notice?
Sure thing. This meeting is being held in pursuant to and in compliance with emergency ordinance number 20-A16, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID disaster. Committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Marty Meth, Tom Paoletti, Rick Seaman, Audrey Coker, Todd Cohn, Martha Davis, Peter Thompson, Ned Galloway, our board liaison, and Daniel Bailey. And I think that's all that I see. Did I miss anyone?
No, I think you've got everybody. Thank you.
Good. Persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Places29 RIO Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. And I will note that the staff present is Carolyn Schaefer, Clerk of the Planning Commission, Serena Gruria from our Cape office, Rachel Falkenstein, Cameron Langell from our Community Development Planning Division, and myself, David Benish, also from Community Development. And I'm done.
Okay. Did you catch Lee Condor signed on?
Yes, Lee Condor is also present. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the first order of business is to review the draft minutes. Anybody have any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes, please. Somebody.
So moved.
Okay, Lee moved, Rick seconded. I saw all in favor, raise your hand, please. Thank you, it's unanimous. Okay, so the first item on our agenda now, if approval of minutes, is a small area plan, an update on the form-based code. Rachel, welcome back. It's your microphone.
Hi, Marty, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's good to see everyone again. So I thought for my item, I would focus on kind of what's next with form-based code. I'm not going to give the presentation on the code, but I encourage, if you haven't seen it, it was adopted by the board on September 1st, and the presentation and video you can see online. So that kind of talks through just like the major elements of what's in the form-based code. Many of you are probably familiar with that because I know I've talked to this group about it a couple of times before. So that's been adopted. So it's now official part of the county zoning ordinance, and you can see it online. We have a group called MuniCode that hosts our ordinances online. You can go on our website and see it. And it's kind of neat to scroll through because this ordinance has a lot more images in it than our previous zoning ordinances. So there are some street sections and some building sections. You can see kind of what the code words say in pictures. And I think that's pretty cool and hopefully easier to understand for a lot of people. So that's posted, and we're doing some work right now to do just a other few cleanup things, like clean up our website. We have a user's guide for the form-based code, which is even more graphically intensive, walks you through how to use the form-based code and what steps like an applicant would need to take if they were interested in applying. So we're finalizing that. We're finalizing our GIS so that all the stuff is on our mapping tool to show where form-based code is. So that's kind of just cleanup stuff we're working on right now. Next steps for form-based code will be more implementation focused. So the board is just beginning to enter budget season, and we as staff pull together budget requests for the board to consider and adopt in their upcoming budget cycle. So we'll be putting some funding requests in for some more design work so that we can apply for grants for things like road projects. So one that we know we're going to request is support for the road network, the street network for Route 29. We haven't designed that yet. We have a conceptual network in the small area plan, but it needs to be a little bit more fleshed out for it to be something that we can apply for grant funds for. So that's work that we're going to do a resource request to get some consultant help to do some design work. One of the projects recommended in the small area plan is looking at Hillsdale and the intersection between Hillsdale and Rio, potentially realigning that. So that's something we would potentially look at, a more detailed design of that project and consider applying for VDOT grant funds for that. So the next steps on Rio 29 would really be more implementation focus and capital project focus. So that will be part of the board's budget discussion in the upcoming months. So something that we can keep you posted on when the board's talking about those things, and you can see what's in there. But so that's really the next steps as far as our work. I don't have anything more concrete to share at this time, but I would be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, or any thoughts you all want to share on next steps, or where you think we should focus our efforts.
Anybody have questions? Ned, did you? No. So we have been talking, we've been hearing line and grade, of course, for the Rio corridor study, and the small area plan connects right up to the end of their study, apparently. And so how would the form-based code, and you talked about the streets, possibly how they would formulate? Are you looking at line and grade and what they're doing so that we have some sort of connection between that and the small area plan?
Yeah, definitely, especially as far as transportation improvements, we would take whatever kind of the final design or recommendations from that corridor plan and make sure we're in sync and working together and coordinating on that. I don't know, David, if you have anything to add.
No, I think the line and grade has been cognizant of what's in the small area plan. They have been focusing on the areas east of it. Certainly the Fashion Square Mall, Roundabout, and Hillsdale relocation sort of plays into the Hillsdale priority. In my update, I'll be touching on that. But I think that's still, as Rachel indicated, is a priority. With the reality of some of those improvements in the small area plan is they may be dependent on redevelopment of properties, particularly Fashion Square Mall related to Hillsdale Drive. So there's a timing issue. But in terms of looking at how the improvements in the small area plan integrate together and how some of the design features integrate, line and grade is certainly familiar with the small area plan. And I think vice versa, we're going to make sure that they mesh before the final draft of the plan is completed.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, well, Ned, I think I see your hand up.
Yep. Rachel, remind me, I know we had incentives that we're working on incentives in housing Albemarle. There's also similar incentives in the form-based code. Are they separate? Are they going to fall in line with the housing Albemarle, obviously related to the housing piece, not any commercial, non-residential type stuff? But is my memory right on that?
That's right. The form-based code has an affordable housing component to it, and it will follow whatever the final housing Albemarle recommendation is. And I know the board's working on incentive packages now related to housing. So yes, they will be in sync.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? So I think we have a fairly easy agenda in terms of not pushing us too much in terms of time. Do any of the attendees, attendees have any questions that they would want to raise a hand, be recognized? Okay. So then I'm going to go on. I would note that Judy Schlissel and Brian, I don't know if we caught Brian last time, are also attending, Tom, so make sure they're listed. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Rio Commons site plan update. Cameron, welcome. I didn't recognize you with your mustache. You're hiding from everybody. So anyway, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Marty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cameron Langell, and I work in CDD. And I was the lead staff reviewer for an initial site plan project that was submitted earlier this year that's called Rio Commons. I'm going to give some basic info on the project and just an update on where it stands in our overall process. And then if any of you have questions, I can answer those. So to begin, the Rio Commons project is located directly across from Dunmora Forest Drive. It's on the west side of Rio Road. The project totals 7.1 acres, and the property that it's located on is currently zoned R4. We received the initial site plan to develop this property, and what it was proposing is 43 single-family attached townhomes. It also proposes to provide a connection to the property located directly north of it, which is where the Rio Point project is located. Some of you may know that as the Parkway Place or the Wetzel property rezoning that is currently under review with the county as well. The site plan was approved on July 9th, and it was approved with conditions that would need to be met prior to the county approving a final site plan for this project. I have not had any contact with the developer or their engineer since we issued the approval letter, and no final site plans have been submitted for review with the county yet. So nothing has reached final approval with this project. And basically, the way the county ordinance works is that the applicant has up to a year after issuance of the approval letter to submit a final site plan application and begin that review cycle. So that is the basic information on Rio Commons and where it stands. And Marty or any of the other CAC members, if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer those for you right now.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for Cameron?
Yeah, I do.
Lee, go ahead.
Cameron, when the developer for Rio Point was in, he mentioned that there was an intention to connect the roads for this development to Rio Point. Is that still the intention?
Yes. So the application plan that is part of the Rio Point proposal shows a travelway connection being made to this property where Rio Commons is also proposed. On the initial site plan that we reviewed for Rio Commons, they also made that connection in the same place that's shown as Rio Point. So that was shown on the approved plans, and that would be something that we would require to definitely be on the final site plan before we approved it.
So would that mean that autos from Rio Point could exit through the Rio Commons exit onto Rio?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any, does the county, or have you had any indication that the road on from Rio Commons could go all the way to the Waldorf School Road, I guess is what it's called on the other side?
Yeah, so the initial site plan for Rio Commons does have a connection being made to the Waldorf School property, but it was marked as an emergency access only. That said, Fire Rescue did have some questions for this applicant and comments about necessary revisions that need to be made. And normally we require at least one connection, like full access connection, as well as secondary access points, just depending on the number of lots that are proposed. In this case, they may need to actually upgrade what they originally showed as an emergency access to be a full connection to Waldorf School. That would be something that we work out once the final site plan has been submitted, though.
Is that Waldorf School Road a private road, or does the county have a right to have it access onto that road? And I was unclear when we drove it a little bit.
Yeah, Waldorf, the Waldorf School Road is a private road. It's not part of the public road system.
Yes, but you still can ask that you can still require that Rio Commons access onto it, and cars can go down it down to Rio. Is that right?
So we could require the connection to be made,
Yes.
but in terms of the vehicles actually using it, that would probably require the Waldorf School Road to be upgraded to meet our standard. I don't think it meets that standard at the moment. It's a private street in terms of being named in our system, but it actually is just designed to a travelway standard, much like you would see in a parking lot or something like that.
Mhm.
So the cars, in Rio Commons would be able to go up into Rio Point if that project comes to fruition. I will say that VDOT's comments were pretty substantial for Rio Commons, specifically looking at the main entrance road onto Rio Road for this project. VDOT has said that they may need to actually construct turn lanes to access into the Rio Commons site. And that includes right turn lanes in or left turn lanes into the project. VDOT asked them to provide what we call turn lane warrants, which is basically an analysis that determines how many cars are going to actually be using their road. And if it reaches a certain threshold, VDOT has standards that trigger the requirement to do additional turn lanes. So that's another item that would be more analyzed further when the final site plan comes in. But I would say that it's likely that the primary entrance into Rio Commons would need to be upgraded to even a higher standard than what the initial site plan shows.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you. That's very clear. Other questions or questions, period?
Oh, one more if I could. Is there a plan for a sidewalk along the west side of Rio Road?
Yes, it was a little bit unclear. The site plan showed a sidewalk along the whole frontage of the Rio Commons project, and there was a label that said it was 5 feet wide. But when I actually measured it using an engineer's scale, it was designed to be 8 feet wide. So that was one of the comments we had, and the county would like to see that sidewalk be wider because part of the Rio Point proposal is actually doing, I believe it's a 10-foot wide kind of multi-use path that could be used by bicyclists and pedestrians. So it makes sense to continue that larger width further down if the Rio Commons project does get developed. So, but yes, there's definitely going to be a pedestrian facility along the frontage of Rio Commons.
And just, Rick, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Cameron, I have a question about that. It sounds like the Rio Point project is planning to have sidewalk that goes all the way from the Trail of John Warner Parkway up across their property. Rio Commons now would have sidewalk going across their piece, but there's going to be a little section then kind of in front of those buildings that belong to the Waldorf School that go down to their driveway that would then be without sidewalk. And then the project that's underway right now on Rio Road is to have sidewalk going from the Waldorf School's driveway up past, further on Rio Road. So I would just suggest that somewhere in the county's planning, we figure out a way to pick up that little piece that would go from the east end of Rio Commons to the Waldorf School's entry road. So that connects all that sidewalk together.
Thank you. Yeah, and we agree with that. And the answer would be if those two smaller parcels happen to redevelop, I don't know exactly what they would be redeveloped as, maybe additional townhouses or something that would trigger county site plan requirements. We could then make those sidewalks get installed at that point so the full connection is made for the overall network. But on the flip side of that, if they didn't ever redevelop, the county could, do a capital project to put in that missing sidewalk segment so that the network is cohesive.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Cameron, just to reconfirm, the Rio Point is scheduled for the board on November 7th, tentatively scheduled November 17th. Is that?
That is correct. It is scheduled to go to a public hearing on November 17th.
Okay.
I am not aware of any reason that it will not definitely go that date. The agenda will be completely finalized about 8 or 9 days ahead of the meeting. So if anyone has questions about that, you can reach back out to me. But all indications are that it will be having that public hearing on the 17th.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you for attending and taking the time, Cameron. I know you have a really busy schedule. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We're on to our next agenda item is the Rio Corridor Study update. David, you have the microphone.
Okay, great. Thank you. Serena, are you able to put the presentation up? You can. Good. She was having technical difficulties before. Great. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Marty. The intent here is to provide you hopefully a relatively brief update of the corridor plan. I'll provide a status of the consultants and project teams work on the concepts for phase one, following the public input process and the direction and comments from the board's meeting on 10/13. Serena is here and she'll provide in the second half of this some information regarding the public outreach on phase two. And we have a few questions for you regarding that. So let me get started by just giving you a status report on where we are after our public input processes and our meeting with the Board of Supervisors. And the notes that you see here are structured in a way that, as you recall, there are kind of 5 components of improvements that the consultant was looking at along the corridor. And the language here is fashioned or really parroted from the consultant's presentation, where he provided guidance to the board or recommendations to the board as to what our paths forward were. So what we've done is sort of refine these based on the project team's discussion of what we heard from the Board of Supervisors and the public today. So let me start left to right, top to bottom. The roadways section, I'm not going to go into great detail to explain these. I think you are probably pretty familiar with all of these, but the roadways section was, if you recall, really the cross section that's being proposed. That's the 4-lane cross section with a divided landscape median pedestrian or shared use path on the north side and a sidewalk on the south side, strategic arc cuts and crossing points. So the comments that we heard from the public and the board, while there were some questions about further details, how crossings would take place, where crosswalks were, most of those comments were really part of the next step of refining the concepts. So the consultant had recommended the path forward is to refine the concepts proposed for the roadway section towards the next and final draft of those concepts. So that's what we're moving to, is continuing to work on finalizing and providing more detail to those sections, again, crosswalks, transit stops and things of that nature. The next area was the public realm. If you recall, the public realm is really those areas adjacent to the right-of-way, road right-of-way. They were sort of referred to as engagement areas. Those were the sections that were providing sort of the public space adjacent to the right-of-way as development and redevelopment occurred along the corridor. Those engagement areas were high, medium, low, or no engagement, depending on whether it was commercial, mixed, more intensive residential, or low scale residential. The direction that we heard and the board seemed to be comfortable with us continuing to refine those concepts for the public realm towards finalizing a final draft of those concepts. For the Hillsdale Old Brook Road Northfield intersection, which was proposed, if you're familiar with that intersection, multi-road intersection, the consultant had proposed a bean roundabout concept. We heard from the public some concerns about how that functions, how pedestrians would be able to negotiate through it. But many of the comments that we heard were comments that are related to further refining that concept and looking at it and getting to a final draft. So the board appeared to be okay with the consultant moving forward with that concept. So that's what we'll continue to do. Again, refine that concept towards developing a final draft of it. One issue that came up and a question that we had earlier with Rachel's presentation, the consultant indicated a need to sort of confirm the intent of what was called the Fashion Square Roundabout. That's essentially the Hillsdale relocation, necessitating the Fashion Square Roundabout near the Putt Lane intersection on Rio Road. The project team, in evaluating this, just wants to reaffirm that is a project that is important, one that is a priority improvement. As Rachel said, the next step is to do further analysis of it and detailed planning of it. Some of the realities of that project is that it would be very expensive to do and probably is going to be highly dependent on redevelopment of some properties in that area, including Fashion Square Mall property itself and the properties along Putt Lane area or the Arden Place area. So that creates a timing issue that makes it a much longer term project. As it relates to this Hillsdale project, I think the project team wants to emphasize that we feel like both projects are important. It's not an either or, they are both needed. They probably are on different timeframes though, in terms of the ability to get constructed. But Hillsdale, we would continue to work on it, and it is seen as a project that is probably needed sooner rather than later. For the Belvedere intersection, which was the green tea concept, again, based on the comments that we heard from the public and stakeholders, I think there was a general feeling that this was an improvement to the area. There was some concern about how much of an improvement it would create and some of the confusion about how that design would work. So there is also additional work that is necessary on this one that the consultant acknowledged, a need to revise and continue to work on concepts to integrate the church access, potentially entrances related to K-Tech may become involved in improving the overall plan for that area. So there seemed to be general support from the board to continue on that work on this concept. So we're going to, again, refine that concept towards drafting a final draft of the concept. We'll be working with VDOT and the appropriate county staff on those designs. And we'll consider a signalized light at intersection as an option in this further work. For the John Warner Parkway, the project team, based on board comments and the comments that we heard from the public and stakeholders, we've determined that the consultant will not move forward with additional detailed analysis of the consultant's concept. What the consultant will be doing is organizing intersection options into 3, possibly 4 scenarios. That will be the VDOT concept, which is concept is already in place from that funding process, the line and grade initial concept, and then secondary concept or revision to the consultant's concept at a very high level, very schematic, that would try to indicate some adjustments that could be made based on the feedback that we heard, but no further detailed analysis. The intent is to cite issues and opportunities, as I say here, positives and negatives of each of the scenarios, but not make any specific recommendation for any alternative to the VDOT concept. The intent here is just to provide information that may be informative and helpful for VDOT as they move through their process to design the funded roundabout. This work we anticipate will be taking place over November and December with, we hope, something ready by the beginning of the next calendar year, the first quarter calendar year, the January, February timeframe. I think with that, I'm going to stop. I think it might be helpful from a timing standpoint, just to let Serena go through her section, Marty. And that way we'll know how much time we have left and we can kind of come back to this or go through Serena's part with her. So
Sure,
I'll
that's
turn it over
fine.
to Serena.
All right. Again, I'm Serena Gruya. I'm the public engagement specialist here at the county. My computer is a little wonky, so just raise your hand if I'm not coming through clearly, or I need to revise my computer approach. So this is all related to the phase 2 process. So phase 2 is the intersection of John Warner and Rio back to what is essentially the city line. And so the idea here for us today is I just wanted to share a general approach, and then you all were so helpful in the last phase thinking about where we should put flyers and additional ways that we could get out in front of the community. I thought I'd try to get in front of you to get your expertise and advice for this next phase. So the engagement goals remain the same as our first phase. Generally to be inclusive and seek additional voices that we don't typically hear from, and then create a platform that everyone can learn about the project and the concepts behind, so that we have an equal opportunity for people to participate. We want to build out another reference library and have clear project information. So I have some bullet points here that indicate some of the ideas of what we would want on that phase 2. So project goals, a map of the phase 2 area, a list of the planned projects along the corridor. I'm going to come to questions here in a second, but I do want some feedback from you in terms of what additional information you all would suggest that we put up on the website, but also even potentially having webinars about new information we could share. Questions for the community members, so that would be you and everyone else. Similar to what we had earlier with questions about how you experience that piece of the corridor, where the opportunities are for improvement, what trouble spots are, and what features we might that could be improved. And again, we're going to come back to this question. And then outreach efforts. So I don't know, I'm new-ish to the county, and so I don't know what like the formal responsibilities of the CACs are, but in my mind, you all can really serve as information ambassadors and share information out with your different networks in your communities, and then community connectors. So I see that role as, you might know the HOA president of a community that's directly on the corridor, and I might tap you on the shoulder to get that contact information, that kind of thing. That's what I see as a community connector. Pop-ups, I know I've met a few of you at the pop-ups before, so continuing that effort. Our email newsletter, the public input website, and then we have the opportunity to put up some of those flyer kiosks like you've seen before. So generally, that is the phase 2 approach. I'm interested in having you share what you think is missing, what role you would like to play. And I think I'll leave the slide up so we can continue to reference it. But Marty, I don't know if you'd like to facilitate this part of the conversation. And certainly I'm always available to talk or take your email suggestions as well.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to facilitate it. Let me just think about how I'm going to see everybody. That's, oh, wait, give me 1 second to get myself. Okay, so why don't the members of the CAC, if you have comments, start by shouting out. Somebody raise their hand. I'll see if I can pick you up.
Well, I see Peter raised his hand.
Peter? Yeah, I don't see Peter. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'm
There
there.
you go.
My room's a little dark here and my internet's unstable as usual in the evening at home. Thanks, Serena and David and everybody for your presentations. First, just a suggestion about the outreach, and then I've got a question about the phase 1. You sort of alluded to this, but there are a lot of neighborhoods in the corridor that probably have existing meetings. I think of Treesdale, for example, when you talk about folks that not necessarily get to the table. So that's my suggestion to pursue. I don't have a contact at that particular community. And then a question back on phase 1, Marty, if I could.
Sure.
I'm pretty much up to speed with everything and in support of everything in concept as it stands today. With a question about the Belvedere intersection, in particular the traffic signal. I understand from Line and Gray that they cannot recommend a traffic signal there in their report, because VDOT's got to do a warrant study. That seems, I understand the warrant study process, been there, been through it. VDOT told us for years that they were certain the warrant study would warrant a traffic signal at Belvedere. They said that for years and years and years until they stopped. But it's confusing to me process-wise that they can recommend a roundabout somewhere, but can't recommend a traffic signal, or at least a warrant study being done. And I understand from some comments from Line and Grade that they do believe a signal is needed there to make it fully work. And it would seem weird to me and dysfunctional going forward to recommend something that's incomplete without the signal. I'm particularly concerned still about the left turn out. I hear a lot of comments about how it's only allows one point of conflict turning left out of Belvedere, but in reality, there's 3 points of conflict today, both Rio going up and going down and turning left on the Belvedere. There's still 2 points of contact in the green T, people going from John Warner up to 29 and people turning left on the Belvedere. There's still 2 points of contact, which to me is still very dangerous. So I'd like some clarity on the process and what we can do to try to up that signal, not just as a thought, but get it studied and what we can do to include it in the recommendations.
Well, I hate to put Ryan on the spot. He's here to listen. I think to the point that we are right now was the notion that we needed to revisit that or visit that with VDOT again in terms of our next steps in evaluating that intersection. So I don't know that we have a definitive answer or whether we can recommend or not, but I believe the idea was to both use this time to engage with VDOT again on the traffic signal. And I think it was actually both a standard traffic signal and signalization of the green T, I believe. So I don't think I have a definitive answer for you, but that's some of your questions, I think, is some of the work that is part of this next step in engaging with VDOT and why that was specifically noted that engaging with VDOT on the design. I think there's more detail that's needed for that, both for intersection connections, what the alternatives are for signalization, either conventional or with the green T concept. I certainly understand your frustration because I've been there with the warrant issue for a number of years as well. We want to make the recommendations in our plan as realistic as possible. And I think that's what the consultant wants to investigate further.
Yeah, I just know from the Hillsdale extension project at the old senior center, there was a signal at that Hillsdale Greenbrier intersection for 10 years. And at the very last meeting, they announced that there wouldn't be a signal there. And the city wanted it, the county wanted it, the police wanted it, the neighbors wanted it, and VDOT just stuck to their, it's easier to say no. And even when they acknowledge that, there are places where there's extenuating circumstances and the guidelines can be followed, but not to the T, because on 250 at Farmington and Boar's Head, for example, there's 2 traffic signals very close to one another because there's extenuating circumstances with the railroad and other issues. So I know that they can bend. They just choose not to sometimes. And I just really want to push this point. And you see, a lot of people use the center know I'm involved in this, and the feedback universally is the design is significantly better than what we have today and significantly better than the R-cut U-turn, which didn't excite anybody as an improvement. But they're universally, to a T, dozens and dozens of people. So I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of users of the neighborhood. So thank you.
And I do believe that the signalization also has something to do with another issue that has come up, I think you raised, in making sure that transit is functional through that area, what's needed to make transit accessible to the Belvedere area, I think plays into that inner lighting issue as well. So good points. We're aware of it. And I think that's part of our next step on Belvedere.
David, can I ask a question just relative to that?
Mm-hmm.
Or Marty, I should ask if I can ask a question.
Sure, please, go ahead.
So irregardless or regardless, whichever word is right, of that, what is said in a corridor study. At any time on an intersection, the process would be the board can request the intersection study to see if it warrants a light. And I know
Yeah,
the study hasn't been done in a while. That's what Peter's alluding to. So whether this, now we've asked the consultant to do some further work on signalization, but whether or not they recommend that or not, in a lot of ways is immaterial, because if we want to explore whether it's the green tea concept or what exists today, we can request the study, and then if it warrants it, it warrants it. Am I off on my thinking on that?
I think you're correct, and keeping in mind that this is a plan that just sets broader intentions and goals that can be worked on through the various processes that VDOT has. Ryan has got his hand raised. He may be helping to correct me or respond better. They have a little more expertise in those areas. So I'll defer to Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, David. I just wanted to add a couple clarifications. When we
I'm
say
sorry to
we
interrupt.
cannot-
Can whoever's microphone that's live with the background talking, mute your microphone, please? Sorry, Marty.
Yeah, I think it's Judy. Judy. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you. When we say that we can't, I think I previously said we can't recommend a signal. What I meant was we do not have the data in hand or to be able to do the warrant. So we can't complete the work of the warrant. And we want to be clear in our study. We don't want somebody looking at our study and saying, oh, well, they recommended it, so they must have done the warrant. There needs to be a specific engineered study that addresses that. And Ned and David are right when they say that can be a separate process that can be independent of any of the recommendations that we make. I do want to talk about really briefly about conflict points, because I've heard that come up in relation to the green tea versus just a standard intersection. When we say conflict points, we don't necessarily mean a stop controlled situation where you have now where there's no signal, there's just the minor street is at a stop condition waiting for a gap. What we're saying is any potential accident. So if you signalize an intersection, you still have conflict points. So what the green tea does is two things. It reduces some of the movements, mainly the through movement. So somebody could not go from Belvedere across the street to City Church. So that cuts down on some of the possible conflicts. But really what you're talking about is the signal cycle length, the amount of time that the signal it takes to make a full rotation. That is going to be drastically reduced in the green tea situation, because the one of the legs, the southbound leg, is not a part of that traffic signal. So the southbound leg will continue to flow regardless of what the signal is doing, and the signal would only stop the northbound traffic in order for the left turns to be made. So that's the main advantage of having the green tea, is that traffic signal would have a substantially shorter cycle time.
Okay. Peter, your mic is shut, is muted, so I assume that answers your question for the moment. Lee, you have your hand up?
Yes, so I've got a couple of questions for David relative to phase one. For one thing, I'd like the
Lee, excuse me, Lee, let me interrupt you first. I don't want to make this is supposed to be a phase two. I'll come back to phase one, but let's go through and see if we can accomplish and answer Serena's questions for phase one. I promise we'll get back to you. We have time, okay? So I want to, so do people have, want to comment on Serena's questions for phase two? I mean, I'll start. I have a general comment, Serena, if I might, that and during that Judy, mic's on again. There we go. We'd like to keep the road. We'd like to keep the road, the nature of the road, which is rural. Keep it that way. There has been a couple of Judy. Okay. There were comments on phase one, and it's the only that a lot of people commented. It looked like the design was making it into a highway. We'd like, but the road for East Rio, the 2-lane portion, is rural, can't be widened very much, and we'd like to see it kept that way as a rural road or a semi-rural, whatever. I'm not sure the exact term, but that's the first thing that struck me. We don't see a way of widening it, so consider it that way and make whatever design is going about to keep it in, to take that into account.
That's good. Maybe this is a good segue. One thing we hadn't mentioned that I was going to mention to everyone is that your next meeting, which is not next month, but will be in December, we propose the 9th. We're actually going to have a listening session, the consultant and staff with the CAC here. We'd like to spend a few minutes just hearing some of your insights about the project. A little bit more substantively. Today is really about process because we want to start to get that public engagement process going. So any comments are useful, but keep in mind that we hope on the 9th, our plan is for the consultant and some of the project team to be here to actually get some of your insights about what issues you see and what opportunities and desires and concerns you have specific to the corridor. And to have that sort of listening kind of opportunity. We'll be structured around some questions we're still working on, but really it's more just to get some earlier feedback from you guys as the consultant is working on their background work right now.
Okay, so from John Warner Parkway to Penn Park is a fairly straight portion of that rural road. Then it begins to curve quite a bit. I don't know if Serena's been on it. People seem to speed up on it. In fact, in particular, Rick and I were on the road. I think he was the one who commented. I realized that if you're coming up from the city heading toward John Warner Parkway, you're on a curvy road and you see a straightaway, you have a tendency to gun it. So we do see speeding on that straight portion of the road from John Warner Parkway down to Penn Park. So anything to do that, to eliminate part of that.
So I wonder if we phrase that in a question for a survey, what are some of your concerns about that stretch of road? Speed sounds to be a concern for you specifically. So I just wonder, if we could categorize those concerns, what would you say in addition to speed as a concern that I could, then ask a broader community to, check a box. This is a concern for me.
But you have so many things about to be going on there at this point. You've heard the discussion about Rio Commons and Rio Point. So I think ultimately there may be a concern that that portion of the road is going to get crowded, particularly in rush hour when people are coming and going on one or both of those communities.
Marty, I have Judy as an attendee now, and she has her hand raised.
Okay. Let Judy go, and then I see Rick has his hand raised as well.
Okay.
Judy, I didn't see Judy's. Go ahead, Judy.
Go ahead, Judy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sort of. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, we're in the midst of traveling, and I'm trying to do this on my phone. Anyway, a question for Serena. can you give us numbers of people who participated at the pop-ups?
Yes, if you give me a second, I can pull that up. So I can come back to you.
Okay, or you can,
Okay, we lost her.
Well, Judy, if you can hear, I will also share that with Marty so we can get that information out.
Okay, that'll be fine. We'll make sure she gets it. Okay, Rick? Why don't you?
What occurs to me about this particular section of Ryle Road is different from the phase one portion of Ryle Road. It's predominantly neighborhoods with a lot of direct access out onto the road. And I'm thinking that one of the questions that we might ask the residents who live along that piece of road, which direction do they go most often? Because I'm really curious to know if people are coming out of their residences, are they heading downtown? Or are they heading to the other portion of Ryle Road and going, over to 29 or going down the Parkway? Because I think it'll make a difference as to how we think about travel on that particular piece of road. Because for instance, if people are predominantly pulling out of their driveways or pulling out of their neighborhoods and turning toward the KTEC and the John Warner Parkway, that's going to tell us something different than if people are pulling out of their driveways and trying to go downtown. Because I think we can pretty much bank on the fact that the city is not going to change Park Street. So people turning toward downtown, whatever, if we try to do something which makes travel easier on that portion of Ryle Road, they're going to get to Melbourne and enter the city, and it's going to be just the way it is for the foreseeable future. So that's one question that I would ask. The other thing I'm thinking about, Serena, is that when we look at a map of the phase 2 area, again, it appears to me to be predominantly neighborhoods and subdivisions. And I think it would be useful on that map to designate those particular neighborhoods so that we can focus outreach efforts to them, and it may give us information about where we could put additional kiosks or other bits of information besides Penn Park. I'm thinking about, Locken Hill, for instance, where or Treesdale or Dunlore Forest or any of those neighborhoods along the way. They are distinct neighborhoods that may have distinct perspectives. And I think putting that on the map would be very helpful.
I would observe, just to add to Rick's comment, that I've lived here about 4 years now, 5, and we don't have contact between the neighborhoods with the possible section of Dunlore Forest are close by, but most of the neighborhoods are pretty distinct. And so I think Rick's idea is good. It's going to each neighborhood and putting up a little Cossack would be helpful, would get some of that word out.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Marty, could I add something?
Sure, please.
Obviously the pedestrian and the bike, when you were talking about what are the bigger concerns,
Yeah.
obviously the pedestrian and the bike infrastructure is all over the place along that section. If it does exist, it doesn't exist the whole way. If it doesn't exist, and then transit stops, etc. So I'm seeing a lot more pedestrian activity, but you got some sidewalks that force you into the road. They're disjointed. Even the project we're doing is not going to marry all of that. So especially to the top of, to top where it starts to go down and curve around Eco Village. But up there, the pedestrian traffic, the bike traffic, there seems to be a lot more of that activity than there is on the west side, at least, immediately around KTEC. So that would be one I would throw out there, that I know Marty's received some emails from residents specific to that. So that should be an overarching concern, which I would imagine it would be anyway, even if we don't mention it. But
I thought about that a little bit, but the road is so wide, curvy and windy there, and doesn't look like there's a lot of room to expand it, but be interesting to hear what comes out of the study. It really would be. The other thing that strikes me is that while people don't go in the city, people do cut over to go to Pantops. So on the bypass. So I don't know how you capture the people who are cutting through on that road, Serena. Is there maybe even a portion to even go back to the library or it's just, I don't know how you reach those people who are traveling on that portion of the road, maybe to go up to the Pantops area or somewhere to get to the point where you get a sense of who's using that road who are not local residents, besides, coming out of the various developments. I know I'm not completely clear, but that's where I think there is a fair amount of traffic. I remember there's 10,000 vehicles per day going on Rio Road at least.
That's correct. And there are past studies of that, so I think there's at least some historic information, but that might be a good, we'll think about how to see if we can gauge some public input from that.
Okay, anything else? I think, Rick, we had talked a little bit about looking at, as you go down the road, where people have line of sight visibility issues or turning issues, to look to see where there might be some left turn lanes possibly included.
Yeah, Marty, I'm thinking that what David is asking us to do is to hold on to those comments until we have this other listening session in December. And here we're just wanting to talk about process a little bit. I agree with you. Yeah, things like, line of sight and left turn lanes, I want to bring those up when we have that kind of input.
And I don't want, some of these are good preliminary comments because it can help Serena figure out what sort of questions to ask. I don't want to cut off comment. I just wanted to let you know there is more follow-up that's going to be a little more in depth about your thoughts. Yeah. So, and Tom's I think had his hand raised too.
Okay, I didn't see it. Go ahead.
Yes, I was curious, is there someplace on the county website where there's more information about the study since the last information was put out? 2 videos originally were out.
What kind of information are you looking for?
Just anything that is beyond what was presented in those original 2 videos that were posted a couple months ago. I mean, that's the only thing I've found or known about.
Well, we're not at the point of having concepts as yet. When there will be concepts, I think Serena and the consultant will consider whether that's a process we want to go through again. We felt like it was pretty useful to do that. We will be, I think, Serena and I will be looking at what we need to do to freshen up the phase to start to provide a little bit more information about phase 2. And it will continue to be updated as we do generate information. We're a little bit premature to have the videos of the concepts as yet. The consultant still doing mostly background work.
Okay, anybody else? Is there, Serena, again, is there any way of getting an article in the paper, Daily Progress, or on TV to talk about this? Have you reached out that way to talk about the corridor study in general?
Yeah, we send out press releases when there's these big milestones. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? So I think you've drained us, I guess. I hope it's been helpful to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So we're up to the next agenda item.
I think some, Marty, someone had a question that we held off. I think Lee possibly on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Lee? Yes. Where is Lee?
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to see among the alternatives that VDOT considers for John Warner Parkway, Rio Road intersection, to also consider the one I submitted, which not only solves the problems with that intersection, it solves the access to Rio Point, which also solves the access to Rio Commons. It keeps intact the access to K-Tech, has a transit stop, has a pedestrian overpass, solves the problems with Belvedere Intersection and Greenbrier Terrace, which none of the others do, all of those things. So I'd just like to see that one included. Furthermore, I offered a couple different alternatives for the Hillsdale Old Brook Northfield intersection, one of which could be implemented for a very reasonable sum, say less than $250,000, and within a few months instead of waiting years. That would have a very good chance of solving the accident problem. So I have to say I haven't had much success with getting Line and Grade to listen, but I have sent an email to the supervisors after their meeting on the Carter study to appraise them of what the alternatives are. I just think that I've actually spoken to quite a few of the residents of Dunmore Forest, and they didn't like what was proposed, but they like my plan. So I just think that it's worth considering more voices to one. I mean, I'd be happy to be included in those meetings with VDOT if and when they occur. And like I say, it doesn't cost anybody anything, so I'd just make myself available for that.
Well, we'll take that into consideration. I don't think I'm prepared to answer that. There are some issues about what we've hired the consultant to do and their professional judgment as to what their product is that we've contracted for. But we certainly have your input. It has been looked at by the consultant. I think where we are right now is more assessing the work that we've done to date with some high level look at some of the adjustments to the consultant's plan, but really more just outlining pros and cons built around what we've done to date and the VDOT funded plan, and not to entertain any further options at this point in time. So I think we're kind of for the John Warner Parkway Riot Road intersection, really good. The plan is to focus our time on the work that we've done to date and not look at really other significant options at this point in time. I'll discuss that with the project team though, so I appreciate your input.
I mean, I'll make a comment to this, Lee. It's not that we don't appreciate the effort and the idea, but I'll say the same thing to the people that were reacting to the placement of the roundabout in Line and Grade. Line and Grade was hired to do a job, and they have to deliver the product to us. And all of the other ideas and feedback that we get along the way can be part of the record. But the board, the time to discuss the VDOT application that's been approved for smart funding is come and gone. We voted on that project. The design elements, I mean, there'll be site planning and modifications just like our other major transportation products. But I've made this statement to the Dunmore community. This supervisor is not going to VDOT after I've received a funded project that I voted on and go, oh, I'd like to change it drastically. We are where we are with that. There are some things relative to your project and your idea that I would, if you and I want to meet and sit down, there are some things in there that I think are problematic with that design, just like all designs. If there's anything that we can learn from it that are positives for that roundabout at John Warner and Rio, then great. It should be the same thing as the input we're getting from the line and grade proposal. Now, as far as the rest of the corridor goes, it's no different than some of the ideas you put into via CTAC to the MPO, like your flyover concept for 250 and hydraulic. And the next time that comes up for discussion, your idea is going to be on the table. So I would imagine going down the road, just like this proposal will be a planning document, that some of the ideas that you put out there for this will also serve like this planning document will, to inform and help decide what the best solutions are going to be. So I want to provide my appreciation for the ideas coming forward, but I also don't want to be providing any sort of false hope based on exactly where we're at on very specific projects.
Okay, thank you. Serena, you had a hand up?
Yep, I just have a real quick follow-up to Judy's question. We had a total of, for the 3 pop-ups, we had 114 people.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I saw it on your computer. And Tom, you had your hand up too? No? Okay. All righty, so we're coming to the next item on our agenda, liaison updates. Ned, anything more that you would like to add?
Well, I mean, I think the nice thing is a lot of the things that we've been providing updates on for a handful of years are actually happening.
Right.
Except the fact that we're asking about culverts parked out at Dunlora. Instead of those going away, we got more as we wait for the sidewalks to go in. So all of the staging that you see the work out there now going on to get the sidewalk project we've been waiting for to happen. I did find out about those hedges between the Dunlora, where you do the right turn in to the Belvedere. If any of you were listening to the VDOT report and traffic study at one of our last board meetings, I found that row of hedges that Judy has brought up before, because it was about whose responsibility it is to maintain it. It sounds like those were planted without permission onto VDOT property. So I have to chase this down a little bit more, but that was stated at a board meeting when I was brought it up and asked about it. So if that's the case, then that might be, at least that could determine what the path forward could be. But now I kind of got an insight into how this occurred. I know that we still have the Chick-fil-A entrance. I know that we still have the attorney's office over there, both of which I kind of did a drive-by this past week several times. And I know we still have the stormwater stuff that we're working on through Carsbrook and all of that. I don't have any new information on those items other than, I mean, the Chick-fil-A and the attorney spot, I think are going to be, we have to keep our eyes on it. Frankly, I think it's going to be a spot check. I brought up some of the if you've noticed right there on the Warner Parkway in that intersection, there's plenty of places where this occurs. But on the Rio stretch, especially, even going past 29, there's so much of these median tree. I mean, there are trees growing out of storm drains. So that conversation or that discussion at the board meeting with VDOT, I think, is going to get some action on it. You'll probably hear follow-up conversation about that because it's going to impact budget during budget time. But I mean, a lot of our main roadway corridors just are not looking up to snuff, and a lot of them are in public domain, whether it's VDOT or something perhaps the county could do, at least in my opinion. Let's see, you guys mentioned the Rio Point coming in November, so that's on the watch list. Marty, if there's anything there that I'm missing that I could provide update on. I know that we were thinking about getting a written report in place. So I've got my notes on that. Marty has sent me the PowerPoint. I just have not managed to get that into a written report that I can start to provide in addition to the verbal report.
No, I think this is all right. The verbal is fine. I actually think the Chick-fil-A, I go past it now and keep an eye on it. I only saw one Friday night when it was packed up of all times. But in general, I think if they just put a sign up on the right side and say we have two entrances, that would solve, yeah.
Well, I did see, I intentionally, when I went to Lowe's the last time, drove down past there. They do have some new signage up. It looks like Chick-fil-A signage that's trying to get people to go through the parking lot. So
yeah.
I think they're aware of the issue, and I think they're trying to get it.
Yes, I do too. Thanks. No, I have no new items. Anybody else on the, I don't think you need to bother with a written report. I think we're all right just the way we are right now, Ned.
Well, it's easily done. It should have been done. And I think on months where we don't have a meeting or if something gets canceled, that can still push out to everybody, that I do think that's useful. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Dan?
That'll be brief. Just want to give a little bit update. So there's, while it's outside of the Rio CAC area, it is in the Rio Magisterial District. There's been a request for a rezoning for 5 parcels in front of the Charlottesville Health and Rehabilitation Center. And so they held their community outreach meeting at the Rio 29 Places Hydraulic CAC this past month. It is to the rezoning request is from R6 residential to planned residential development for 250 multi-family apartments with some affordable housing components. So it's in its early stages, but I just want to make that aware of everybody on this, since it is right across the road from us on 29 there. And that's pretty much all, unless there's any questions on that.
Anybody have questions? No? Great. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, no, that rezoning was covered in the Daily Progress in some detail, so it was pretty interesting. Okay, so well, let's go to other business. Let me bring up our next meeting. We have 2 meetings scheduled. This happens every year since I've been on the committee. One is the day before Thanksgiving, one is the day before Christmas. So I'm going to suggest we have 1 meeting in the middle on December 16th. It's sort of somewhat in the middle between those 2. Is that all right with everybody? Okay. So be it. So the next meeting of the CAC will be December 16th. We won't have one in November. We've covered the watch list. Does anybody else have any other comments?
We can't have a meeting on the 16th. Well, no, that's right. That's when your next meeting is the 16th.
No, I said December.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm sorry.
Is that all right, Carol? Yeah. Okay. I thought I had checked the calendar 12 times. Okay, anybody else have any other comments? Great. Okay, we're going to finish early. I want to thank David for getting all these people together. Thank you very much. And Carolyn, thank you for keeping us straight. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Won't see anybody before then, and we'll see you in mid-December. Good night.
Okay, thanks, Marty.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.